I know it's been a while since I made one of these videos, but with Dragon Ball Super airing its final episode, I think it's time to go over the worst and most irrelevant Wish Orb series, Dragon Ball GT. So after the end of Z, the guys who made the anime were like, hey, we don't need the comics or the original author, we can just make up our own story and keep the show a success. And they were dead wrong. The show is a complete failure, and even before Super came out and contradicted it, everyone considered it non-canon anyway, because you know it sucks. And I know for the last few videos I've been going over the plot of the entire series, but that's not necessary. I mean, that being said, I'm still gonna go over a few of the sagas. So in this show, we step into the Grand Tour. A brand new adventure begins with another challenge for Goku and his friends. Now he's an alien strong, but the imp made him a child again, and the Dragon Balls are turning burning to end, the world and everything within, the ultimate battle between good and evil, and we all know who's gonna win. But when the sand clock dictates the consequence, will our heroes have the strength to actually do their job the first time, or will half of them just die and be useless, and end up getting resurrected by the Wish Orbs, making any and all deaths completely devoid of actual emotional weight or value? The answer is the second one. Anyway, now that Goku is a kid again, it turns out that there's some nonsense Negro Star Dragon Balls that were made like a million years ago by the old Guardian before he splits, and also he conveniently managed to never mention it for the past 30 years to any of the main characters, but oh well. And it turns out that if Goku and his friends don't retrieve them or something, then the world is gonna blow up. So the main character spends a whole season with his granddaughter and vegetable son looking for some of the Wish Orbs, and they find them or something, I don't know. But then they come across some lame ass scientist that tries to get in their way, and he has a bunch of robots that waste time too, so he really needs to catch some shells. Then vegetable son comes across a blob that the lame ass scientist calls his infant, and then our hero starts to throw hands with it as if this is an abortion clinic. But then the infant springs onto the scientist and puts him in his blunt. Also, it turns out that it was actually the infant that gave birth to its parents, because that makes sense. Actually it does, because he's one of those things that Goku's wicked ass species exterminated like 100 years ago, and now he's back plotting vengeance. And also somehow he knows that the aliens are on Earth, and it took him this long to make a move, and if you think about it, the move would have never been made if the niggas weren't looking for the Negro Star Dragon Balls, so his plan is dumb. Anyway, the hero tried to save an alien, but he's possessed by the infant, because apparently he can do that, so this villain is really different from all the previous ones. So infant makes it on Earth, and takes over Goku's unimportant son's body, so oh well. But then he takes over the relevant son's body, so things are getting serious. Also, the Green Man shows up to stop him, but his appearance only serves to further show disrespect to his character. Then the infant takes over Vegetable's body, and this time he's decided that this is pretty much as strong as it's gonna get, but still he sets out to make everyone on Earth his son. So by the time Goku and the others get to the Earth, they find that everyone has now joined with the ops, except for the Bubblegum, the Fraud, and the Negro Indian kid. So the heroes give the Negro up to the Guardian, but little do they know he's actually being possessed by the infant. So Goku goes home, and his whole family switched up on him and starts throwing hands with him. So Goku prepares to get them all out of the way, but then the Fraud shows up and explains that they've been taken over by the infant. And then the infant himself pulls up on Goku, and he's almost put on a shirt until he gets saved by the ruler of the universe, who takes him to another dimension. So with Goku gone, the infant wishes for his old planet to be restored, and all the people from Earth are transported there too by ships and stuff. And also the non-possessed characters stow away with the bubblegum. So Goku has to do some nonsense in another dimension, but who cares? Then he gets to the next dimension and tries to go back his tail with the rulers so he can be strong or something. Meanwhile, the kid that Goku trained thinks that the infant put Goku on the news, so he tries to catch a fade with him, but he's just too strong, and the kid ends up almost becoming a pack until the bubblegum decides to fuse with him because they were once the same being, and then they become super strong or something. But this is the alien show, so we already know what's gonna happen. Meanwhile, the old ruler manages to bring Goku's tail back, so that's cool. Back on the new planet, the kid shows up to throw hands again, but it doesn't work out and he gets eaten by the infant. So Goku finally shows up and transforms, but it's still not enough to defeat the infant. But then he looks at the Earth and becomes King Kong. So his granddaughter says something insignificant to him, and he takes on a new form yet again. And if I have to be honest, this form is actually one of the few decent things about this show. With his new form, Goku gives the beats to the infant, but then Bloomer makes a machine that manages to simulate the same nonsense that Goku went through. So now infant has gone King Kong too, and now they're equally matched. While this is happening, the old ruler figures out how to bring everyone that switched sides back because of some water, and he brings the Guardian and the Negro Genie back to the real nigga side. Then they bring a bunch of other irrelevant no-names and Goku's son back, but we're not checking for them. So the guys are too useless to actually throw hands with infant themselves, and they decide to lend their energy to Goku, and he manages to knock the infant out of Vegetable's body. So then infant tries to escape and go somewhere else, but he gets put in Goku's blunt before he can. After all this, the bubs on Earth come to their senses, but there's a big problem, because they weren't able to fix the thing with the Negro orbs, so now the Earth is gonna blow up. So they managed to teleport most of the people that are still on Earth to the new planet, but there's still some people left, so the Green Man decides to stay behind and get put on a show with the Earth. Then he has a final goodbye with Goku's important son, and that's that, I guess. but the Green Man also decides to stay dead forever, cause that will mean the Negro orbs can never be yours again, so he really made a sacrifice. But now that I think about it, that really doesn't make any sense. When the Green Man died the first time, the wish orbs died with him, so how were they recreated when he died again? Cause I thought the old Guardian had to physically recreate them the first time they died. It also doesn't make sense cause they should have ceased to exist anyway when the Green Man and the Guardian fused together, but hey, that would actually make sense, so it would have no place in this trash ass show. So the Green Man wish Earth back with their orbs, and the niggas getting their feelings over the Green Man that sacrificed himself, so you know it's whatever. So this next arc is supposedly the shortest one in the franchise, yet despite that more stuff happens in it than the one before. Also I think this is the most interesting one plot wise, and it's still garbage, so that says a lot about the show now, doesn't it? Anyway, it starts out 1 year after Infant got put on the paper, and there's a new tournament. So like always, there's a bunch of lame-ass faces that no one's trying to see, including the kid versus the fraud, but then the bubblegum tells the kids to just let the fraud catch a W, because he's the hope of the dumbass people. After that, Goku and Vegetable prepare to throw hands for old time's sake, but then Goku says he's hungry, so that's over with. Meanwhile, in the next dimension, the lame-ass scientists got created by the Infant, and the Hydra scientists have been teaming up, and they create a new male robot, and start contacting the one that's already made on Earth. Then they open a rift through the dimensions, because they can do that somehow, and a bunch of villains from the past make their way on Earth. So Goku and his son's wives are at home, and suddenly Vegetable's son shows up needing a doctor, and reveals that it was the male robot that made him like this, and the robot says that Goku must go to the next dimension, or else the ops will take over the world. Meanwhile, some dark aura appears around the male robot, and a voice tells him that he's just half of one whole being, and that voice is the robot that was made in the next dimension. So they both power up, and then the whole sky gets even bigger, so all the niggas start doing opposite to each other, and while this is going on, all the villains are still wreaking havoc on the world, and somehow it isn't destroyed yet. So Goku crosses over to the next dimension, and meets up with the scientists behind all this nonsense, but they piss off, and Goku gets trapped with two of his biggest ops, Fridge and the Bug, and also they look really weird here. Meanwhile, the heroes are throwing hands with the villains, and it's kinda nice to see that the creators of the series haven't forgotten everything that happened more than 5 years before this aired. So the granddaughter gets Hydra out of the way, and Vegetable puts his big alien partner in his blunts again. Also, the bald guy and his family are just watching because they're completely worthless now, so the male robot pulls up and convinces his sister to join them. Then the bald guy starts yapping, so the male robot puts him in a shirt. But honestly, this is like the millionth time he's been taken out, and there's like 2 sets of wish orbs, so is there really any need to even care? Like, it's not like his L has any real consequences anymore. But then the male robot gives the female robot the beats too, so that's dead. While this is going on, Goku is throwing hands with Fridge and the Bug, and obviously he's holding them because it's been like 30 years and he's gotten way stronger. So then they send him even deeper down to some place of torture. So the ops are satisfied at first, but then Goku turns the tables on them and hands them an L, but the rifts and dimensions are closed, so the Green Man does something and Goku manages to escape. Meanwhile, the male robot and the robot from the nether dimension fuse and become a totally different being, even though they look identical, so you would think their fusion would look like what they already looked like before, but whatever. And for some reason, this fusion is the strongest character on the show, and easily gives the beast to all the heroes to try to stop it. But then the granddaughter sneaks up on the Hydra scientist and forces him to call off the robot, but it turns out that the lame-ass scientist from space duoed a couple across the Hydra scientist and reprogrammed the robot to only take orders from him, and then he has the robot get the Hydra scientist out of the way. So Goku finally shows up and throws hands with the robot, but it's too strong, so he transforms and still tries to throw hands. But the robot is only getting stronger, because it turns out he can apparently absorb energy. So then Goku tries to kamikaze in order to take out the robot, but it doesn't work out, and Goku's transformation gets worn out. Then the female robot shows up and starts dissing the male robot, making him feel some way about his life. So he gets the lame-ass scientist from space out of the way, and prepares to get the heroes out of the way too. So the female scientist catches a fade with him, and while he's open, Goku goes through him, and then puts him in his blunt. Now that all that nonsense is over, like always, the heroes decide to use the wish orbs to wish all the fallen niggas back, but instead some weirdo dragon comes out, and it turns out that throughout the franchise, whenever they made a wish, a bunch of negative energy got released too, and now they've manifested into a bunch of sicko dragons. As some stuff goes down, they get their dragons out of the way because whatever, they suck. So it turns out that the good dragon needs to go away for 100 years and have some positive energy to grant the final wish that brings everyone back in order to offset all the negative energy, and Goku agrees to fulfill that role and leave for a century with the dragon. Then they have a bunch of sappy goodbyes, but at this point I'm over it because the show fucking sucks. Then 100 years later, Goku comes back and looks at his lame ass descendants or something, but whatever, the show's over. Okay, so one thing I actually like about the show is the fact that they brought back the race that Goku and vegetable species wiped out. I mean, the saga itself was garbage, but so that's a pretty cool concept. Another thing I liked was the new form, it was lit. And I think one of the coolest things about the show was how all the villains from the past came back. That was actually a really cool nod to the people who've been following this show. A lot of niggas hate the fact that Goku got turned into a child for this show, but honestly I don't really mind. I mean, I feel like it was a decent callback to the first series, and it's kind of interesting to see a younger version of the main character, while everyone around him has really aged. That being said, for every one thing the show did right, they did about a million things wrong. First of all, the idea of them going across the worlds to find Negro orbs is stupid and uninteresting. They tried to recreate that lame lame-ass Dragon Ball humor, but it didn't work out because I really don't care about these new characters. And speaking of characters, one of the worst things about this series is that they severely underused them. I mean, I know that comes along with running for like 10 years, but still the way they push aside some of the older characters is completely disrespectful. Where are the Bum, the Cyclops, the old guy, and the bald guy, or basically any human male character besides the fraud for that matter? I mean, I get that they're too weak to compete with the aliens or something, but still that doesn't mean they should be completely ostracized and relegated to supporting roles. As much as I criticize Super, I'll admit that they actually do a good job of showing their characters. Even the Green Man has been tossed aside, like what the hell is one of the best ones? This is kind of a trait from the Bubblegum Saga that I hated so much, but it's even worse here. Like, why would Goku only see his supposed best friend the bald guy only once in a blue moon? The only characters that actually matter in the show are Goku and Vegetable, and if you think about it, Vegetable takes out like 90% of the time, so the whole show is basically Goku bailing everyone out in every major conflict. Another problem with the show is the art. It's ugly. I think the first series and Z have some of the best art styles in all of anime because it goes out of the mold and actually tries to be original to some extent. But then GT takes a giant step over all of that and makes all the characters look weird as hell with trash as coloring. I also hate how being sent to the grave doesn't matter in this franchise anymore. I mean, to be honest, it hasn't mattered since the battle with Fridge, but still there's absolutely no emotion to be felt with any character being put on a shirt because they're constantly in a position to be wished back either through Earth's orbs or the orbs from the Green Man's planets. Also, the plot of the last season is dumb. Like, how did nobody ever mention to anybody that overusing the Dragon Balls will lead to the end of the world because of negative energy? Like, I think that would have been addressed or something. Another bad thing about the show is how terrible the power scaling is now. Back on the Green Man's planets, when people would fight would be way more impressive, but now that everyone's like a million times stronger, the way they affect their surroundings isn't noteworthy at all. Like, the characters just got too strong, and by the end of the series there's absolutely no meaning behind any of their transformation. Overall, the show sucks ass. Even before Super the movies were announced, I considered it non-canon because it wasn't made by the creator, and it contradicts the original story anyway. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video because I'm finally done with all the shows in this franchise. It's been a long time coming, and hopefully the movie coming out this year is actually good, and not complete toilet water like most of the series for the past 25 years. Okay guys, make sure that when you subscribe you hit the notification button, because that lets you know whenever I make a new video, and as always, thanks for watching.